My name is Emil Mijares. I'm 23 years old. I am from Anaheim, California. My grandfather's name was Emil Mijares. He was a Filipino jazz pianist, composer, and an artist. He moved to America in 1984, and he was a great man. Very interesting man.
Emil Mijares was known as the grandfather of Filipino jazz. His stories crossed oceans and generations, from surviving World War II in the Philippines to making it big as a musician and starting a new life in America. He died in 2007, leaving behind a legacy of music and the stories he told his grandchildren. I talked to Emil's family, friends, and colleagues. These are his stories.
He had such an interesting life story that my parents would always tell me and my brother about just growing up during the war, how the Japanese would be invading.
Most musicians will have agents, right? And they'll have managers and stuff. My dad never had one. He did not have the need for one because they would just come and call him.
This man was one of our legends. The way we give value to, Duke Ellington, the greatest pianist of all. That's how I saw him.
When he came to America, he didn't make a lot of money. He actually worked like a couple security jobs. But he did what he loved till the day he died. He was a jazz musician.
It's just really interesting, all the things he's been through and the risks that he took to end up having the life that he had.
We tend to think of jazz as an American phenomenon. What some might be surprised to find is that there is also a vibrant Filipino jazz community, with many Filipino artists making the genre their own. How did jazz migrate from the streets of New Orleans to the streets of Manila? Did jazz travel 9,000 miles through the radio, television, or the internet? In fact, Filipinos have been exposed to jazz since its birth in the American South. The first Filipinos settled in Louisiana in the 1800s. The Philippines was at that time a Spanish colony. Some Filipinos, looking to escape forced labor and taxes, enlisted to work on Spanish ships bound for Acapulco and deserted once they reached America. Filipinos in the Philippines were introduced to jazz by African American soldiers during the Spanish-American War in 1898. The rest, as they say, is history. Emil first heard jazz on the radio. Here's his son, Gabby.
He got his first music influences from his aunts. One of his aunts was a graduate of Juilliard School of Music, and they were always very steeped in classical music. And so the very first leanings of my dad was towards classical music. But then it was like maybe, I think he was in his teen years, that he heard Stan Kenton on the radio, and it just blew his mind. It was just so totally a different departure from what he was used to, that it piqued his interest.
Emil probably heard something like this.
Thank you very much.
Here's Stan Kenton and his orchestra.
We were part of ever is quite complete without the playing of this next number, so we hope you enjoy it. And once again, here is the Peanut Vendor.
After hearing Stan Kenton on the radio, Emil channeled his creative talent into making jazz. In his fourth year studying to become an architect, Emil dropped out of school to pursue his passion for music. His wife Elsa remembers her husband's rise to fame.
There's this Harris place, that's his first job. He was still a student, he would just go there and jam with the musicians. And that's when he decided to drop out his architecture and go on with music. So from there, people heard him, club owners heard him. Words would spread around. How have you heard of this Emil Mijares? He was only 22 years old. He plays so well. That's how the word got around.
At the height of his career, Emil composed music for theater, TV shows, and film. He played with virtually every great musician in the Philippines, and even played with American and international artists Kevyn Lettau, Sergio Mendes, Harry Belafonte, and Nat King Cole.
Nat King Cole went to the Philippines, I think for a show or something. And it's normal for singers or entertainers that after their show, they would want to go to clubs. And he must have asked people where he could jam, they call it jam, where they would just play without practicing. He could sing without practicing, just jamming. And he was brought to this place, to the club where my husband was playing, and Nat King Cole enjoyed playing with my husband.
Emil's life was filled with tremendous highs and tragic lows, but it was always filled with music. I talked with Emil's daughter Mirella. She saw how her dad and his music were affected by both his love of life and the hardships he faced during his youth.
He was a true artist who, I think, because of the difficult life he's had as a child, had to find ways to escape reality.
Emil was born in 1935 when the Philippines was an American Commonwealth. In December 1941, 10 hours after the attack on Pearl Harbor, the Japanese began their occupation of the Philippines.
The Japanese invasion of the Philippines was conducted on schedule. The first landing was made on December 8th, and during the 2 weeks following, beachheads were successfully secured at 6 points in the archipelago. The Nipponese assault troops had been well prepared for this kind of campaign.
When he was 7 years old, during World War II, his entire family was thrown into a concentration camp in the Philippines because of the fact that his grandfather was a senator. People in political positions were targets for the Japanese occupation. And so at the age of 7, he was thrown into a concentration camp with the family, where he was made to watch executions every day. And it just kind of makes you wonder, what does that do to a child? It can either make you stronger or it can destroy you. And in my dad's case, I would say it made him a complex person, a good person, but someone with so many layers to his character. He had to learn to escape his reality, and I guess it meant finding a world, where he can go into, and that happened to be music.
The Philippines faced another period of harsh rule under the dictatorship of Ferdinand Marcos. During this time, 3 of Emil's eldest children moved to the United States. Despite Emil's success in Manila, he decided it was time to leave the Philippines. His son Gabby was one of the first in his family to move to America.
I came here in 1984. The year before that was when the Marcos government executed Aquino.
Gabby is referring to the assassination of Marcos's political opponent, Benigno Aquino.
That kind of sealed our fate because our parents decided, hey, you know what, we got to get our family out of here. Things are not going good. So they sent us over, me and my sister. My brother had been here since 1980. So in 1984, it was me and my sister. In 1987, the rest of the family came over. That's when he started to explore the U.S. jazz scene.
The spirit of jazz is improvisation. To improvise, to break the status quo, to get by without notes on paper, without a guide or safety net. This spirit is what first attracted Emil to the genre. It might also have been what pushed Emil to make a new life for himself in America.
He was never satisfied with the status quo. He always wanted something better, and he would always strive for something better. And that's why jazz really kind of like, and him, it was a good marriage, you know what I'm saying? Because he had that nature that would just complement the very nature of jazz too. It's a development. You can't, that's why nobody can really explain what jazz means. Is there a word that means jazz? No, but it was set to where jazz, the word jazz would just encompass anything and everything that could happen to that field, And so they jazz it up, they mix it up,
Jazz vocalist Charmaine Clamor coined the term Jazzipino to define the melding of American jazz with traditional Filipino music.
the music or the art that you create, or in this case, we're talking about jazz, also is rooted in or can be traced in the person's characteristic. A good example is a lot of our Filipino or Pinoy jazz artists, in the spirit of improvisation, they would come here and bring that flair into the United States, into the land of freedom and, you know, the American dream, and have that trait with them, hoping that that spirit would create more opportunities for them to be more creative and share their craft to this country.
Emil Mijares never made it big in the United States. He worked as a security guard to make ends meet, but he continued to play the music he loved. In 2004, the Jazz Society of the Philippines, USA, gave Emil a Lifetime Achievement Award. After years working in obscurity as a pianist for hire, Emil was finally recognized as an artist and mentor, a legend to those who knew him. Charmaine Clamor is a founder of the Jazz Society and thinks of Emil as a father. Charmaine thinks of Emil every time she hears the song, The Nearness of You. It was one of her last performances with Emil. This is that performance.
It's not the moon that excites me, yet there is and delights me. Oh no, it's just the nearness of you. It isn't your sweet conversation that brings this sensation. Oh no, it's just the nearness of you. When you're in my arms and I feel you so close to me, all my wildest dreams, they do come true. Oh yes, they do. I need no soft light to enchant me. If you only grant me the right to ever hold you so tight.